Thank you, everybody, for joining us for another episode. This is the 121st recorded episode. And just a reminder, like the last few episodes, our friend Michael David Wilson at This Is Horror, he has a writing and editing consultation service. Two notable guests that he has worked with is Josh Mellerman and David Moody. For more information on that, all you have to do is go to www.michaeldavidwilson.co.uk/editing. Welcome to Dead Headspace, a part of Silver Shamrock's Horrorcast, a podcast network that includes Killing Time with Silver Shamrock and Unburying the Dead, where we exhume classic horror paperbacks for the new generation. I'm your host, Patrick R. McDonough, joined always by my co-host, Brennan LaFaro. Say hi, Brennan.
Hello, everybody.
And today we are talking to the author of two books worth noting, Helena through Clash Books, and When We Enter That House with Off Limits Press, Claire L. Smith. Say hi, Claire.
Hello.
And let's just dive into it. What got you into horror?
Honestly, I like to say I was in the midst of my emo phase when I was like 15, and then suddenly my ninth grade English teacher pulled out Edgar Allan Poe in the middle of class and was just like, okay, we're doing this for the next 2 weeks. And it was arguably just one of the most interesting 2 weeks. Like, I aced those 2 weeks, and this was a teacher that was a really harsh marker, so I knew I did well, and just the whole sort of Gothic genre just drew me in, and it all just went through from there. I finally dived into it.
Is there one
especially
story?
Since you
go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, especially since I was like the biggest pansy leading up to this whole thing. Like, I never touched horror movies. I remember once when I was maybe like 13, I tried to watch American Psycho because I thought I was being so cool. Like, oh, I'm watching this even though my parents told me I probably shouldn't. But I did. But then I finally stumbled onto Poe, and that just led to like a lot of other Gothic fiction, and that led into more horror. And then here I am.
That's pretty neat. Brendan, go ahead, buddy.
All right, so I'm going to preface this by throwing out my own thing. I would like to know if there are anything you like to share about your emo phase, maybe embarrassing stories, things that you did, anything at all. And I'll go first. I think when I was in high school with my emo phase, my Chemical Romance phase, I had long shoulder length dyed black hair. If listeners can picture that nowadays. So how about you, Claire? What was your phase like?
Honestly, it was sort of late, again, it sort of started in 15 and I'm still technically in it. But pretty much it was like, again, dyed jet black hair that was like cut into a pixie cut for a while, because that was the closest thing I could sort of get to any kind of rebellion, because I went to a sort of quite strict religious private school. So the most I could do was cut my hair super short, dye it black, do my nails with Sharpie, because of course the teacher would notice and go, oh, you need to wipe that off. So instead of spending 15 minutes in the teacher's office, trying to scrub it, I could just quickly go wash my hands and then draw it back on later. So that was most of my teenage emo phase. Also worth mentioning, Helena, my first Gothic horror novel that is based off of the song Helena by Michael.
I think I put that one together.
Yes, I'm so happy so many people have made that connection. I'm just like, oh, maybe it's too far of a reach or something, but they're just like, it's the best thing ever. I'm just like, yes, we're all connecting to our inner emo phases.
Hey, in terms of album openers, that's a top 10, if not top 5. So
absolutely,
props to you for going there.
Yeah.
I never had
apparently you can actually get married in the church that they filmed the music video in.
That's pretty neat. I never had an emo phase, but I really did like My Chemical Romance and quite a few other screamo and emo bands. Used too. That was a pretty big one for me. I was just a big chubby kid that liked emo music.
Hey, that's an emo phase. It's not as extreme, but it counts.
I had hair then too, so I guess
that I do not believe.
Yeah, there's photographic evidence of it somewhere. Brad, do you want to dive into her book with Off Limits Press or?
Yeah, so kind of a leading question in there. You told us that the Gothic is strong with you. And in your work, that's definitely an influence, inspiration, and it's clear to see. So, you kind of fell in love with that aspect of horror, but then you told us about how you tried some other stuff. You gave American Psycho a go. Do you generally just kind of lean toward the Gothic, as in, are you stuck in that time period, I suppose, or have you branched out a little bit and are excited by other aspects as well?
Oh, absolutely. Like if we're going with movies, like I think like I really enjoy the sort of psychological aspects of horror, which is very much apparent in Gothic horror. For example, like there's a lot of aspects of like madness and insanity and isolation and things like that. So like another great one that I love, like probably one of my favorite movies, is Black Swan. And just that like the main character's just descent into this sort of madness, like, which probably maybe that does have a few Gothic elements. I don't know. It is much more of a psychological horror. But yeah, I think I guess my love for Gothic horror really sort of branches out into all these different sort of genres. Like I do have this sort of weird fascination as well, a little bit with sci-fi horror, like Alien was a big one. So yeah, pretty much. And even with sci-fi horror, like the whole aspect of isolation is another big thing with Gothic horror, just sort of being completely out of your element and just trapped in a space where you are not safe. In this, like in sci-fi horror, it's literally just space where you're just completely out of your element and just don't know what to do. Those are things that just terrify me for a start. So that's why I'm sort of drawn to them, because I'm like, ooh. But yeah, definitely, like I think I'll always sort of find my home in Gothic horror, but I definitely want to branch out with my other work, hopefully in the future.
Did you ever see Winchester? It came out in 2018.
No, I didn't get around to that.
I don't know why I randomly watched that, but it really was hit the nail on the head for every. If you like Gothic horror, if you like Victorian, I think it's Victorian era, but it's just so crazy.
Yeah, like I know the story behind it and about like the woman who lived there and why she kept building the house. It was just so concerning.
Yeah,
You
and
just go, you're right, love.
it plays with the senses like every good Gothic does. That's it's maybe I'm wrong, but my understanding of Gothic horror, it's more tell and feel than show. Because when you show it, it's creepy, but there's a lot leading up to it. And yeah, I could see the appeal with that subgenre. Brian, do you have a favorite go-to Gothic or ghost story?
I really actually liked the I've never read the novel, The Woman in Black, by I think it's Susan Hill. Although we should definitely do that on Unburying the Dead at some point. But the movie that came out with Daniel Radcliffe probably like 10 or 15 years ago, I thought it was actually really good. One of my favorite, or depending on how you look at it, least favorite things in horror movies is when you're looking at a character and something in the background that was still throughout the entire shot just moves. I fucking hate that. It scares the hell out of me every time. And that movie had such effective use of stuff like that, to the point where you're watching it on the edge of your seat because the scene is very subtle and downplayed, and you're just waiting for something like that to happen. And when a director kind of plays with your expectations, you're looking at the shadow of a clock or something, and you're like, I know that shadow is going to move, and then it doesn't. It just makes the tension and the anxiety ramped all the more up for the next scene. But I thought that movie was a really good example of it.
Yeah, definitely. Like the whole atmosphere that you just know like something's up. Like you don't know what, but it's just, it's going to pounce and it's just going to be just perfect in that way.
Yeah. And despite being forever typecast, Daniel Radcliffe's not a bad actor.
No,
he's great.
Yep.
So this might be unknown to some of our listeners, but you're also an artist and a damn good one at that. And you were talking about. Yeah, you're talking about Black Swan. I saw you draw your Black Dahlia. illustration. I mean, it really is good. Do you do cover art?
Yeah, I actually designed the cover for when we entered that house. Actually, Sam was really lovely and let me design
Okay,
that myself.
that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense that you say it now. That you do your own art. I would love to do my own, but I can't draw for shit, and you can. So there's that. Brennan, jump in, man. I'm going in so many different directions right now, so I
Yes,
just
you
want
are.
to keep it
So
focused.
we were going to go into the book, and I think actually a perfect segue to that happened like 5 minutes ago, Claire, when you mentioned the aspect you like about it. You know, people being in stuck in an unfamiliar environment where they have absolutely no idea what to do, and if that's not a nice little telling of what you're going to read in when we entered that house, I don't know what is. So what we like to do to start out is we want to ask you for the synopsis because we don't want to spoil anything. So give us the back cover copy. Let us know how far you want to go into talking about here.
Awesome. So pretty much the best way I can describe it without directly reading off like the back cover is about these two girls named Zoe and Elle. They both have not best home lives. And despite this sort of like, for example, Elle comes from a very abusive home whilst Zoe comes from a borderline like neglectful home. And as a result, they sort of use so many different things to escape. For example, they both love reading and they both love sort of just going into the woods that surrounds their little village to sort of escape because they don't want to go home for obvious reasons. But one day they come across a sort of house and there's a sort of force that's luring them towards it. They can't really explain why. But, and again, I don't want to dive too far into it, but there are some things and some people in the house that have just these tragic, but at the same time, dark motives. And hopefully I'll leave it at that. I don't want to dive too deep as well.
Let's backtrack real quick before we talk any more of your book. So submitting to Sam, you're still, I don't know at what point the second wave would be considered, but I guess in my opinion by year. So for me, like you're in the quote unquote first wave of her releases. I'm sure she had a lot of great stories to go through, but you were one of the first published ones. How does that feel, especially with the others that she's released so far? Because it's like she knocks it out of the park with books she writes, books she edits, and now books she publishes.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you got Sam, and she wrote true crime, and then with her publishing, she's published Crossroads by Laurel Hightower and The Women is Kings by Haley Piper, and those are two like such big names and such like kick-ass women writers. At the moment I got that acceptance, and the moment I just got that acceptance email, I sort of had to like pinch myself and sleep on it, just be like, nah, I've just obviously forgotten how to read. That's like, so yeah, it was honestly, it's so amazing, like just to have like my work next to these like totally cool writers. And I believe you had Eric on your podcast a couple of I can't remember, like a little while ago, and just to have it like
I don't remember either too. Time doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. What even is time nowadays? But yeah, like it's just, it's utterly amazing.
And you know what? I'm just gonna throw this out there. Waif, second book by Sam. It's fucking great. It's nothing like true crime. And that doesn't mean one's better than the other. It just means it's a lot different content-wise. And I'll leave it at that. Brandon, take away, sir.
And piggybacking off that, you're no stranger to working with great publishers. I mean, Christoph and Lisa at Clash are anytime we've talked to them, they're just a pleasure. And any of the authors at Clash, nothing bad to say. And then to go from there to Off Limits, you're getting spoiled if you go somewhere else. Like I don't know that it could live up to this.
I know, like I was always going like, because I already felt spoiled with Lisa and Christoph because they are such lovely people and they just have like such amazing eye. Like, not to stroke my own ego, but like everyone else's that's ever gone through Clash, like they just have like the best eye for sort of writing and stories. And so I'm just like sort of going to Sam, just like, oh, okay, I'll try not to. Let's see how this goes. It's my second book, but then she's spoiling me as well. And I'm just like, geez, I'm having it too good.
They were really nice, and it's arguably they're nicer in person too, Christoph and Lisa. I met them at Scares That Care, and you know what? Like looking at their table, all their books they publish, and they had a few that are coming out later this year. One of them was John Skip, and I'm like, man, they got from legends to all these new names that are kicking ass. So yeah, I'm a little envious of you.
Well, and I was gonna say, you made a comment about how it feels a little bit weird to say they have a good eye for fiction, because it sounds like you're stroking your own ego, but they really do. Both publishers, Off Limits and Clash, they do not miss. And with Clash, it's especially interesting because they, not that Off Limits doesn't have a variety, but they are a horror publisher, whereas Clash kind of hits all over the place, and it just seems like every title they put out does well and is well received. So yeah, I mean, just a third or fourth or fifth way of saying good on you for hooking up with those two, and congrats on having that new book out with Off Limits. Now, yeah, of course. You mentioned, and I won't go too far down this road, but you mentioned the people in the house who have, kind of tragic, but also not necessarily good intentions. And I thought you did so well with that, because that's, the two kind of markers you set up there. These are not antagonists. There's a lot of depth there, and you get 90% into the book, and there's more to learn, and there's more to unpack, and it hits with a little bit of a punch, keeping it extremely vague there. And another thing that I really liked was, you mentioned how Elle and Zoe were both, coming out of not so great home lives, but very in a different way. The whole, where people would call Zoe a princess because she was always so nicely dressed. Everybody thinks she has it so easy. And that's just, you get a glimpse into the fact that that's just straight up not true. Whereas Elle has a little bit more of, it's her home life is kind of a hellhole. So I wonder how much of a conscious decision was that to have these two girls connect over, through that kind of similarity, despite the fact that their home lives are very different from each other?
Honestly, like I did sort of like drive a lot of that from my own experiences. Like I remember sort of thinking to myself at one point, like I mentioned earlier, I went to a private school, and at the same time I felt very lucky, but at the same time I had my own struggles, but didn't feel like I could speak out about them because I was so lucky in so many ways. So I drew that with Elle, but at the same time, like for Zoe, sorry, I'm getting them mixed up, but yeah, with but with Elle, like you can just, I wanted to make that comparison that everyone's story is valid, everyone's struggles are valid, and even though you might come from different backgrounds or from different circumstances, that doesn't mean like, and especially like since they're children, like they're 11 years old, like children can always find reasons to be friends. So that was something I really wanted to sort of bring in, that you can always find comfort and understanding in each other, I guess, despite all the terrors you're going through.
Kind of makes me think that you're good horror for me is like there's some really fucked up stuff, and not every ending has to be happy. I don't like that always, but there's a lot of good ones that have at least kind of a little hope at the end. And not that this is the end, we won't talk about that to spoil that, but it kind of feels like you set up the book where, there's some seriously fucked up stuff that happens in their own separate lives, but there's kind of beauty in childhood, innocence, if you will. Innocence even in the face of brutality, which is, it's hard to pick up that concept as an adult because we're bitter assholes.
Yeah, now, absolutely.
am I hitting the mark at all with this story?
Yeah, absolutely. Like there is like one of the reasons I chose to make them like young people was that you do sort of have this sort of journey where you realize that, you know, things may not be as innocent as you seem, like especially with Zoe, like she's just desperately trying to cling on to whatever childhood innocence she's had left, in comparison to Elle, who's pretty much lost all of hers.
Yeah.
So I guess sort of the whole book is pretty much about that, you know, sort of journey to adulthood, and how much, you know, how you sort of adapt, and how like you sort of can choose, or like, I guess not always, you know, it doesn't always feel like a choice, but it's like, okay, how am I going to progress forward despite this, if that makes sense?
It does make sense. And you know what? I have a question, but I can't remember who's the little sister here. I feel like an idiot. I should know this, but like you got a big sister in there. Who's the
Yeah, Jess
sister?
and Elle. So Jess is the older sister, Elle's the younger sister.
Okay, that's it. Yeah, Jess. Throwing in that aspect, kind of it throws a curveball in their friendship, and like we've all seen it, we've been a part of it. So it's not a question, but my comment is that I could relate in some ways, just seeing it with my friends and their siblings. Actually, I do have a question. Is that based off of anything that you experienced personally?
I know as well, like when you're in that sort of situation, siblings like sort of take on a role. And of course, you know, I've met other people in a similar situation. So it's just like, it's a very interesting sort of dynamic that like, okay, who falls into which role, who falls into like a caretaker role, and who falls into like, how's everyone's trauma responses and how that affects everyone's relationship with each other. If that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. I'm listening. I mean, I just listened. I'm sorry. Brain not working well right now. I'm just trying to think about everything you said and not sound like a moron, but I already failed at that. So your cover, I wanted to ask earlier, is there anything that you can tell us why you chose that cover without spoiling anything for potential readers?
Yeah, pretty much like if you can see the cover, like regardless of your listening or viewing. But yeah, pretty much like I wanted to have this sort of like dark background that sort of like represented like the dark path the girls were going down, and then just have like this big red door that reflected like the door to the house, but then just have nothing else. Because like Sam suggested like, oh, maybe we should have the house in the book cover, and I did consider that because I'm like, yeah, probably good idea. It's in the title. But at the same time, I went, oh, like first of all, like design wise, in regards to like my artistic eye, I'm like, oh, that might be a bit too much. Like it might make the cover a bit crowded. But at the same time, I sort of wanted to, I guess, create a sort of bit of mystery to it, because it's sort of like they're opening a door and heading down a path that's completely unknown. So I wanted to make it, I guess, as not minimalistic, but I didn't want to give too much info away. So pretty much it's just like, yeah, they're stepping into another aspect of life that they unfortunately, like they can't enjoy the sort of like innocence of childhood anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. Now, Helena and When We Entered That House, are those the first two books you've ever written, or have you written anything? I know short fiction, you've got a short list of publications there, but I'm curious if long fiction wise, if you've written anything before these two.
Yeah, like I did write like I started officially like writing like full-on manuscripts when I was 16, and they were terrible. Like I keep a few of them just so I can look back when I'm having one of those writer days. It's like, oh, I'm a fraud, my writing's terrible. But then of course I look back and I'm just like, actually no, everything's fine. Like but yeah, like one thing I'm working on at the moment is sort of like more dark fantasy, and it's actually inspired by a friend of mine and we were talking about like the Fae and like sort of Scottish and Celtic folklore. And I didn't know this, but like apparently like their fairies are just sort of like these mini like evil tricks to gods. Now she's telling me about them. I'm like, go on, like taking notes. So I'm hoping to write like a full-length novel about that, because like I like writing novellas because I like reading them, and I just have this fear of like, oh, what if I'm dragging on for too long? So I want to put on like my big girl pants and go, okay, you can write a full-length novel, you can do it. And like hopefully I'll have that finished soon.
That's pretty funny. You know what? 'Cause the whole dragging on thing, like I never even thought of that aspect of it, but it's funny because yeah, that is a fair, like you don't want to overstay your welcome as a writer.
Exactly.
You, you know what? I wrote my first, because I always wanted to be a screenwriter, and I didn't realize I wanted to be a novelist until way later. But when I was 13 to 16, because it took a few years, I wrote my first full-length feature script. It's not very good. It's a slasher, but like that made me laugh too, because you're like, it's crap or whatever. But I'm curious if you've picked apart that script, if there's aspects of it where, I mean, not script, your manuscript, where you're like, this is good, but it's not executed the right way. That's what I did with mine. Like I got a novel that I wrote I wrote that 2 years ago based off of that screenplay from when I was in my teens. I'm curious if maybe you did something similar as well.
Oh, absolutely. There was this thing is I had it edited and everything, but looking back on it, I'm just like, okay, I can see why this is public. This wasn't like published. I can see why no one picked it up. But yeah, and pretty much like I have kept a hold of it, and I have like a sort of like notes page or whatever in OneNote where I'm just like sort of writing like, okay, this is what I can change. This is what I can sort of, and I have like almost reinvented it, but at the same time sort of kept a lot of what was originally there, like maybe just changed a few character names and maybe sort of changed the main character. But yeah, definitely, like I never sort of like throw out an idea. Like I never, like even if I did not end up liking something, like okay, that could be for later.
Yeah.
Like I think that's the best thing about it, sort of being a creator. It's just like there is such thing like no, there is no such thing as a bad idea. It's just like not the best idea for now, or it just needs reworking.
I know that Stephen King said that a notebook is basically a good way to filter out. He said good and bad ideas, but it's same, not same concept. Actually, it's not the same at all. But you know what? Notebooks are good. Ideas are good. Brennan, jump in, because you're the asshole that wrote his first book, and it's a good debut. So you can't relate to us. You're better.
No, I wouldn't say that, because it sounds pompous, and I just wouldn't say that. Anyways,
I'm just trying to sound better than you.
Yes. No, I mean, some of the best advice I've ever heard is just, no matter how pissed off you are at something you wrote, looking at it and saying, oh, this is just, a steaming pile of garbage, never delete anything, because you never know when you can go and mine it and, Frankenstein's monster, the thing. So, I mean, that's certainly kind of piggybacking off what yours. Now you're talking a little bit about process, so let's go there. Specifically with when we entered that house, when you kind of had the idea, did you know novel, story, novella, or did you are you an outliner? What's the process for kind of starting that thing off?
Oh, definitely. Like actually what originally inspired when we entered that house was a picture. Like ironically, it was like a sort of photography sort of thing of these two girls like holding hands in front of like a decaying mansion. So that's what originally sparked the idea. And then from that, like I'm definitely like, oh, I don't know the like I definitely like to outline every aspect of the book beforehand. But one thing I weirdly like to do is I like to leave the ending opening, because I never come up with a perfect ending. Like I normally come up with it at the last minute, because I've gone through that whole journey of just like, okay, what feels right? Because definitely with all of that, like I changed up the ending like so many times, like especially towards the end, like the lovely Jessica Drake Thomas, she edited it, and just sort of seeing me go like, oh wait, no, I think I'll change this, and she's just like, okay, sure. Just doing that. And then so you're just planning out the whole thing, maybe sitting with it. Like it's very chaotic. Like I always try to figure out like a clean way to answer that question, but like I think it really depends on the book. So definitely with this one, it was very much playing it out, leaving the ending opening, and just working it from there.
I like that process, because I appreciate outliners, but I can't be friends with them. I don't understand how their brains work. Somebody who can conceive of like an entire outline that they stick to. And, I'm sure they tweak dialogue and little things here and there, but somebody who, starts writing the first sentence and already knows what the last one is going to be, that I just don't understand, because I feel like you discover so much about it. And I think your process of knowing most of the story, but leaving the ending open and just discovering where it needs to go throughout the whole writing process. I think that's great. Mine isn't quite that organized, but it's kind of the same way, where I'll, start with the germ of that idea and then get to know my characters. So is that just for this one, or is that generally how you write?
Honestly, generally, like it'll depend like how flexible I am. Like I'll just I think for Helena, I was like a lot more, I guess, stern with it. Like I had much more of an outline for that one and had like a bit more of a clear idea where it was going to head. But for with when we entered that house, I didn't really know, but like I was hoping to meet the deadline, ironically, for Off Limits Press. So I'm like, okay, I need to just start writing and see where that goes. And yeah, I'm really happy with how it ended up, because I think it ended up like a lot, like I didn't have that sort of epilogue bit at the end. Like I didn't have that at all, but I'm really glad that I added that just to sort of wrap it up nicely. I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
It's pretty neat. Maybe you said it earlier, but I didn't know that you wrote this specifically for the call.
Yeah, like I had the idea for a while. I just sort of didn't really have that sort of kick to start it. Especially since Helena was just being released. So I was quite busy, making like doing all the marketing stuff for that. So yeah, I'm just sort of like, okay, quickly, let's see if I can do this. And like I think I managed to finish it in 2 months.
Did you go through beta readers, or was it just you edited it and
I got actually Jessica was like she was so helpful. Like she gave like a lot of insight into it, and I'm honestly so happy I went through her and just sort of it was a really quick process, because again I was trying to meet that deadline, which I sort of need, otherwise I take my time. So it's just like
I totally get that. I love the cover for Helena too. It's just gorgeous. Obviously listeners can't see it, so Google Helena by Claire L. Smith. Brennan, I feel like you got a follow-up question for that.
Oh yeah, you had mentioned, and now I'm spacing on your exact words, so I'm going to paraphrase that you just do a little bit at a time. Are you somebody who just does a little bit every day? Do you write in bursts and then take breaks, or what's your general routine like?
Oh, definitely. Like I normally like I'll try to do a little bit every single day, like whether it's like, even if it's just like 100 words versus 1,000, like I try to keep in that habit. And I normally do it through like quick little bursts, because I can't really, like, otherwise my brain just goes all fuzzy. Like if I'm sort of sitting there for like extended periods of time, like all my creativity goes out the window. So I'm like, okay, I'll go walk around the kitchen for a hot minute, then come back. So yeah, definitely. Otherwise it just all goes to hell. I'm just like sort of staring at the screen and nothing's happening.
Well, I was going to say, have you ever through deadlines, or trying to get a 40,000 word novella done for the Off Limits call, put yourself in a position where you have to write for like 3, 4, 5 hours at a time?
Oh yeah, actually the night before, this is when I was getting like the last edit, actually no, the first draft back to Jessica, because she's like, okay, if we're going to get this in by like the call deadline, I need the finished by this time. And I'm like, okay. And I think I chunked out like 4,000 words over the course of like 5 hours, from like 10 p.m. when I got home from work till like, I don't know, I can't do math, till like the early hours of the morning.
A long time. Yeah, I don't know.
Just like email Jessica, just like, here it is. I'm going to bed now. Thank you so much.
I don't make a habit of it, but on days where I, kick out 3,000 or 4,000 words, I feel like my brain is smoking afterwards. It's like I'm not built for that. Yeah, I'm not built for that. 1,000 words at a time, maybe an hour, and then find something else to keep me busy.
I tried.
Yeah.
I used to write a lot for like hours and hours way before my kid was born, and my head would kill. Like it would be a major headache. So maybe that should have been a sign, but I kept at it. Today I wrote for the first time in months 2,600 words, and that was over like 5 hours. And I was like, oh god, this it feels great, but my head again. I like Joe Lansdale's approach, where it's 3 hours and that's it.
Yeah. I'm sort of the same where like it's like, okay, I have like 3 hours and then that's it. Like even if I only get 100 words out. Otherwise, like again, I'll just be spending like 5 hours staring at the screen when nothing's coming.
So
I'll go do some drawing instead.
I'd like to talk about Australia. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think like the best, if you're like, it sounds like us, the best thing I ever heard there was just don't forget that it's not just writing that counts as writing. It's editing. It's reading back something you wrote yesterday. It's updating your website. It's looking for open story calls. All that is perfectly legitimate writing time, and it's stuff that needs to be done. Just because we're not churning out 1,000 words a day doesn't mean that we're not getting things done.
Absolutely.
So I would like to know about any suggestions or any, I guess, suggestions would be for other Australian writers that you particularly enjoy, because when we talk to people that are outside of the US and we ask this question, we always get some interesting people that we've never even heard of before. So is there anyone Australian based that you would suggest to look into?
Oh, there's this really great, she does like a whole range. Her name is Katja. I can't remember her last name off the top of my head. God. So, but yeah, she's like one of her books, Oasis, is just a really interesting sort of surreal read. That's just I'm so sorry when I get called up. But yeah, like there are definitely a lot of Australian authors that you can definitely check out. Like if you're really into like Gothic sort of Gothic reads, a really great sort of Australian based story that's pretty famous is Picnic by Hanging Rock, and it's based off a true story about these 3 girls that were at a finishing school that just disappeared into the Australian bush one day, and they just never figured out what happened to them, and someone wrote a novel about it.
That sounds terrifying.
Yeah, especially since like that's where I grew up. Like I grew up in the country, and I'm just like, oh yeah, you can, with all like the snakes and the kangaroos and the emus, like it's not good.
The most interesting story from Australia I've read so far is Rue by Alan Baxter.
Yeah.
It's just, how would you describe it, Brennan? Because I want to say it's like kind of like a B film horror movie where it's cheesy.
It's a cheesy creature feature type.
It's a killer kangaroo, very cliche of Mr. Baxter there, but it's just funny. He took a lot of the names from people in like the independent horror side of the book world and just wrote about them, like me and Keelan Patrick Burke or Sadie Hartman, and it was fun. It's like we all kind of bullied him into writing this story, and he wrote it and then killed off a lot of us.
Like, okay, I'll write this. It won't be exactly what you're expecting, but that's the point.
Did you grow up in Australia? Because, like, again, Al Baxter, he used to live in Britain or England and moved to Australia years and years ago. So I'm curious if you're a native.
Yeah, definitely. Like I do have a lot of friends that maybe started off in other countries, then moved down here. But yeah, born and raised in Aussie land. Yeah.
No, I've always wanted to go there. I think it's just very different. And the more stories I hear about it, I still want to go, but I'm terrified that I'm going to die down there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like just normal things that I assumed like everyone does. I'm just like, wait, you don't do that? Like whenever you go outside and put your shoes on, you have to like tap like your shoe to make sure there's no spiders in there.
Oh shit, I haven't heard that one before.
Like always, it's a habit. Otherwise, you slip your foot in and you're like, oh god.
Shake out your pants and no.
Yep.
We got
I remember once Yeah, I was out with my friends. We were kids, and we would always have to like in the pool or whatever, we'd have to shake our towels. Otherwise, you had like this huge huntsman that's like the size of your palm crawling over your shoulder.
Yeah. See, now Patrick's
Terrifying
being
at the
very
moment, but
polite.
hilarious later.
He's saying he'd like to go to Australia someday. I don't. I have no.
Yeah, I don't blame
I'm
you.
horrified of your country, so it will not surprise me if if we're talking to you and just one of those palm-sized huntsmen just walks across your wall behind you. I just assume that's something that happens there.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Like it would slightly bother me. I'm just like, okay, you stay in your corner. All good.
Is that
gonna get a baseball bat and take it out?
Yep.
Is there anything else that you've heard from other people outside of Australia that you're like, I always thought that was normal? Because now you got me thinking, what else? What else is there?
Oh, off the top of my head, like one thing like that always gets me about like sort of when people talk about Australia is like the aspect of Vegemite, but everyone's always eating it wrong whenever like I see it on YouTube. I'm just like, no, you meant to have just like a tiny bit, not like full on loaded on like butter.
I've not tried that, so whenever that happens, I'll just have a little bit.
Just like very lightly.
Brennan, of the Australian authors we talked to, what would you say your favorite story is Australian based?
What's that?
It's probably rude to ask because we have an Australian author on, so I probably worded that terribly. Okay, let's backtrack. Instead of favorite, let's just say interesting. What is another that isn't clear is because she's on right now. We're talking about her books. Another Australian author, Australian-based book that you would throw out there to kind of recommend to people.
It's not somebody we've talked to, and I don't know what she's up to these days, but one of the first, when I started reviewing books, one of the first people to send me a book was a girl named Claire Fitzpatrick, who's based out of Australia, and she wrote this killer collection of body horror stories called, I don't think it was Metamorphosis, but it's something close to that, or it might be that. But I haven't seen her put anything out in the last 3 years, and that was such a good collection. I hope she's doing all right.
I
How about you? Same question. Do you want to talk about your favorite Australian horror story when we have an Australian on and make yourself look mean?
I get it. I'm not going to cut that part out. I
Okay.
sound like an asshole. I admitted that.
Nope, leave it.
Leave it. I leave most stuff actually. So it's like I said, if I meet someone in person, they're going to be like, oh, you're so much more mean in person. But no, I don't have any. They're all beautiful in their own way, own twisted way. So
you asked a mean question, then you don't even have an answer for it.
I said Rue. I liked Rue a whole lot.
Better than Claire's book? Oh my God, dude.
That's
seriously.
not. Oh man.
Just leave.
Yeah. So you're out as host. So Claire, we've mentioned Helena a few times, and I will, admit I have not had the chance to read this one yet, but I want to find out a little bit more about it. And truth be told, now that you've shared that the My Chemical Romance connection, I think I'm definitely going to have to check this out. So give us the synopsis on that one.
Oh, definitely. So pretty much it's set in the Victorian era in London, and it's about a woman named Helena. Shocker. And she's a mortician, and she's like obviously seen as sort of very mysterious and strange since she's a woman who owns her own business. She isn't married, and she knows how to stick up for herself. But the sort of like kicker is that she's a mortician, but she can also see and interact with ghosts. And another big problem is that unfortunately they're not very happy that they're dead, and they're very confused. And as a result, she finds herself in constant danger, and she can't really tell anyone about it because it's like, okay, this is how I get thrown into a mental asylum. So on top of that, on top of like all those issues, a serial killer starts to sort of make their rounds. And this is sort of seen as sort of a blessing for her, because it's like, oh, I get so much more business because so many people are dying. But at the same time, people are automatically suspicious of her because they're like, oh, she's already a bit weird. Maybe she's doing this, like maybe she's the serial killer. And now she's like, oh, great, I have to go and try and prove my innocence, even though I don't want anything to do with this. So yeah, it's just sort of like a spooky sort of Gothic horror mystery type thing.
So I think I read that it takes place in 1855. Did you do any research into what it was like to be a mortician? And also, I'm curious if it was common for a woman to be able to be a mortician back then, or was that just...
Yeah, ironically, that was actually what inspired the novella, because I actually looked it up and I came across this article that it was not completely like, it was like not too common practice, but it wasn't like, since being a mortician and sort of running a funeral parlor was sort of seen as a very like caring role. So it was almost seen as sort of like on par with things like nursing and teaching and things like that. So although it would have been a little bit uncommon for a woman to be running it completely by herself, it was still seen, like the death industry in itself was seen as a sort of opportunity for women to sort of gain financial independence in that way. So yeah, it was definitely like, I think more so in America, but yeah, it wasn't like entirely unheard of for a woman to be sort of doing like mortician work. Yeah.
This isn't mortician work exactly, but have you, either one of you, heard of the book called The Butchering Art? It's by Lindsay Fitzharris. It's what is it? The Grisly World of Victorian Medicine. So it's
oh my god.
Yeah.
It's just insane. Like they'd literally like one of the things they would do, I believe, is they'd like tie like a piece of bacon or a piece of meat if you had like tapeworm or something, and like lower it down on like a fishing hook down into like your intestines of hope of luring it out. Surprisingly, it didn't work because you'd probably choke on the fishing wire. But yeah, that's like just the level of it. Like it was like, obviously they didn't have what we have, so it was obviously like always quite messy. But yeah, just that sort of aspect of history just interests me in the most morbid way.
Yeah, messy, and like you can't get knocked out. Like you can't buy medicine or laughing gas or any of that. And when you wake up, oh god, no, nothing's gonna be the same ever again. So yeah, anyways, that book's fucked up, but because of how like lucky we are nowadays for the medication and technology we got, I'm gonna jump gears to something else. It's pertaining to, I saw it drawn by you. It was on your Instagram, Silence of the Lambs. Yeah, we both share a love for that. I love the movie, but I also have a big love for the book, that and Red Dragon. So it said that Silence of the Lambs was that's the one that did it for you. That's the one that got you into horror.
Yeah, definitely. Like Silence of the Lambs. And again, just sort of having that sort of vibe where it's all about the atmosphere, all about like the little details. Like one of my favorite like trivia from the movie was that throughout the majority of like Hannibal's first meeting with Clarice, he doesn't blink at all during that whole interaction.
I didn't think of that. Wow.
Yeah, like that's why he seems so creepy, is that he's just like, because Anthony Hopkins, he researched the role by like watching serial killer like interview tapes, and he watched Ted Bundy's, and he just noticed throughout the whole time he barely blinked as well, and just incorporated that. And I'm just like, just those little things that just stand out that you may not notice. Like I think he only blinks twice, because like you automatically blink when you turn your head, and obviously when he turns his head, but like other than that, like he's actively just gazing into your soul on purpose.
We are all attempting to turn our heads now to see if we can do it without.
Yep. No, that's what everyone does whenever I tell them that. It's just like, what?
Hopefully people who are driving and listening to this aren't trying that. That's not safe.
And if you do it,
please be careful.
If you do it, just like message us or something while you're driving. Tell us how it went.
That's terrible. You're gonna get us sued.
Oh, no, just like, this is the vibe. Just like, damn it.
So I love that movie too. I really love the book more though. The movie's great. It's one of those where it's like I could see people saying the book and movie are, neck and neck, but I like the book a lot better. And it's just one of those things where there's a lot of copycat stories after it for good reason. And yeah, you're talking about atmosphere and tone, and it's just it's so creepy throughout the whole thing. And you're dealing with more than one serial killer too.
Yeah. Just like, oh, one's enough. Why must we have two that are scaring the hell out of me?
You talked about Ted Bundy, and Ted Bundy was one of the people that, let's see, I want to say it was I can't remember when he was killed. But right before he was killed, he helped solve a crime for the Green River Killer, because that's where Ted Bundy's killed too. And that's kind of like what wow, my brain's not working again. Anthony Hopkins' character, Hannibal Lecter. That's what Hannibal Lecter did. It's just kind of neat how like art reflects real life and vice versa.
Absolutely.
Did you watch or read Red Dragon as well?
No, honestly, like I have a friend who has like all of the copies of Silence of the Lambs, and I've been meaning to borrow them. But we're in the middle of hopefully the last couple of weeks of lockdown here in Melbourne. So I haven't had the chance to see her and just go, hey, can I steal your books for a couple of weeks? But yeah, like definitely, like it's one of those ones that I've just been desperate to read, because, there's this whole sort of debate between like, oh, book versus movie. But like when you have such an argument for both, it's always interesting, or at least worth like diving into both.
Red Dragon's really creepy. The main antagonist in that one is Francis Dolarhyde, and he's just I'll leave it at that. He's very creepy. Brent, you want to dive into what are you reading soon or right now? It's up to you, man.
Yeah, I have one question, and I'm interested because I have no idea what the answer is, but I'm wondering if you celebrate Halloween in Australia.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Ooh. Honestly, like you guys, like up in America, you guys like blow it out of the park. You guys do it amazing. But unfortunately, not as much here. Like, first of all, it's spring right now, so we don't have, all the cool like fall vibes. And yeah, it's not really as much of a thing. Like at most, like it's a great excuse to throw a costume party and like, have a good time. But yeah, no, we don't really trick or treat. We don't really sort of have any stuff like, the department stores might try and push some decorations, but everyone's just like about it. Like no one really decorates unless, you're like me and I'm just like, oh yes, I'm going to keep this up. Oh yeah, give me those skulls. Like,
the
other than that,
no, on the wall behind you is a great decoration.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's a joke. There is no spider for audio listeners. I'm so sorry that you get shorted on spooky season. It makes sense that fall is such a big aspect of it. So where you are approaching summer, I guess that makes sense. But it's just I feel terrible for you guys for missing out on that, because it's so much fun, and it's such especially where you grew up in the country. It's going trick-or-treating and picking out your costume and all that stuff, just being out and wild as a kid is just, it's such a fun coming of age thing. That's why we all rave about it. So you should just
like, it was just something I always saw just like in American movies. Like it's just like, oh yeah, that's what they do over there.
Make a pilgrimage here some October and just, go for it. Nobody cares if you're, really tall and donning a costume. They'll think you're a really tall, like fifth grader or something. It'll be fun.
Yes. Awesome. I'll just come in and just be like, I'm coming, guys.
Yep. If I never been to America during Halloween, I would go to Salem. Like I've been to Salem a few times, and October is just so much fun.
Nice. That's in the bucket list when like travel opens up.
Brandon, take us away, sir.
All right. So what are you currently reading, or what have you read recently that you'd like to plug, give a shout out to any authors?
Oh, definitely. Hold on. I'll have a look. So I just sort of hyped this up on a good friend of mine, Jodeline. She's a booktuber, and I've just recommended this. She's coming out with a collab soon. But one book that I absolutely love, that I just love rereading because like it just gets me every time, is Sarah Tantlinger's To Be Devoured. And it's just, honestly, it's one of those books, like, because normally I have the worst memory. I will like forget like the details of a plot like not long after I've read it, especially if I've started another book. But with hers, it's just, it like absolutely just like tore into me. It was such like a captivating read. And like normally I'm not too into gore, like full on gore. Like I like just a sort of tasteful amount, but with like I was physically gagging at one point because I was like, oh, like I was gonna have dinner afterwards, but then I sort of like just got up and went, okay, I think I'm gonna put that off for a while. Otherwise, it's just not gonna feel right.
Yeah, I totally get that.
I have never gotten to that one, and I don't know why. It's like everybody and their mom was reading it like year and a half ago, and I feel like I just missed the boat. Now it's too late. I mean, it's definitely not too late, but it feels like that.
You don't know why, dude. We read like so many damn books a month. That's why.
Yeah, honestly, no worries.
So we could fit in a novella,
right?
No problem.
Brendan, what are you currently reading?
Actually, it's funny because you mentioned Scottish and Celtic folklore earlier. I just finished up Jennifer Susie's Dead in the Water, and it's first of all, it takes place right near me on Cape Cod, which is kind of a vacation destination on the east coast of Massachusetts. But this one deals with Merrow and other Celtic folklore creatures. And she put out a book earlier this year called Clementine's Awakening, and it was, I didn't know what to expect from it. I'd never read anything by her before, but it just really grabbed me. You know, she's such an awesome writer, and she creates such good characters. And same here, it follows a set of triplets who are, older women at this point in the book. And she just writes them with this depth that you are invested in them, like 20-25 pages in, and they go through this weird, wild journey, and you're totally there for it. But really, really excellent. Pat, how about you?
Yeah, me, I'm reading Phil Fricassi's Boys in the Valley. I'm not too far into it, so I'm not even gonna pretend to talk about what the whole thing's about. But Brandon, you finished it, so why don't you tell us what it's about?
So it's gotta do your work for you. Come on.
Yep.
It takes place in, I think, 1905 at a Catholic orphanage, and put bluntly, an evil force invades this Catholic orphanage. But it's a really, really good coming of age story. It's got blood, guts, and really excellent writing, as Philip does. Truth be told, there's a lot of competition, but I think it's the best book I read this year so far.
Wow. And one that I'm going to be starting soon for an upcoming guest. It's called In the River by Jeremy Robert Johnson. I don't know what it's about, but one of my friends who is not in the industry saw that we were talking with him and was like, hey, I have one of his books. I want you to read it. So he sent it to me, and I'm going to read it. So hopefully, he's a good author, so I'm expecting good things. Listeners, if you want to check out some Dead Headspace swag, go to deadheadspace.com or check out some reviews, articles by previous guests. Where can people follow you, Claire?
Honestly, like I'm all over. Like I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and on TikTok, all of which are under the same handle, thankfully. It's Claire L. Smith, except the I in Smith is an X because I have the world's most basic last name.
So TikTok, that does seem like it's kind of catching on with authors. Why did you get one?
Honestly, like first of all, like I got it originally as a joke just to like consume media because I'm like, okay, I'm in lockdown. I don't know what to do with myself. And like, then I just got completely stuck to it. Like I could not get off it. So I'm like, okay, I might as well make some sort of excuse as to why I'm on here so often and actually, make some sort of, videos for my artwork and for my books and stuff like that.
That's funny.
It's like, yeah, I'm on here to promote my work. Totally. Not like 50 dog TikToks.
I feel like TikTok more than any other social media, it's like playing the lottery, because it's like you're gonna invest your time, but if your like TikTok with your book takes off, like you're gonna sell like an extra 5,000, 10,000 copies. So it's like, what the hell? Try it.
Yep.
Yeah, I've heard it can catch on pretty quick. So Claire, I'm wondering if you have any final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Honestly, other than thank you so much for having me. Yeah, honestly, like I think definitely like with when we enter that house, it's coming out in a few days on the 15th. I'm just like, I'm really excited for this one because like, for example, with Helena, I wrote that in a very like, because I wrote Helena when I was 20 and it came out when I was 21 and I'm 22 now. And those are just such big leaps as a person. So it's like new person, new book, so many different challenges.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's just, I'm super hyped. I'm really excited.
Yeah, you're really young, so I sound like an old bastard.
I know.
I'm only in my 30s, so not a big deal. But
do you want to tell her to get off your lawn?
No, what I was gonna say was that's amazing that she's publishing at the age that she is. That's awesome. I think
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there's people that probably don't even interact with you that look up to you for that reason. It's a big deal. So congrats on those two things. Yeah, absolutely. Brennan, final thoughts, young man, or should I say old man? He's 36 now.
Yes. All right. So, first of all, thank you for spending your morning / early afternoon with us. And just congratulations on the book. By the time this airs, it will be out. People can get it like right this second. They can pause, they can get the book, they can come back for the last 10 seconds of my final thoughts. But it's joining such a wonderful stable of authors in the Off Limits family, and it fits right in. So congratulations, and I hope you sell 10,000 of them.
Yeah, so do I. Thank
or
you.
more.
I echo Brennan, my final thoughts of that, and thank you, Claire. We really do appreciate talking with you and you taking time out of your Tuesday morning.
What is even time anymore? We've been in lockdown too long.
Days don't even matter anymore. Listeners, next episode is episode 121 with Lucy A. Snyder. That airs next Monday, so stay tuned for that. As always, you have many choices in podcasts. Thank you for picking us.